We are following a once cold case out of Ohio where a husband was the prime person of interest, but there were no charges in his estranged wife's drowning death for 24 years. Paul Hicks is accused of knocking his wife, Regina Hicks, unconscious before putting her in the passenger seat of her own car and then driving it into a pond where she drowned. Paul Hicks was charged after his close friend came forward to say he wants to tell the truth about what he really witnessed back in 2001. And that close friend, who is now struggling with health issues, Stephen Gates, he took the stand today. He is the star witness for the state, no doubt, and he requested that he not be recorded by the media in any way. But we do have a rough transcript of his testimony. So let's get into the best evidence presented during his testimony today. Here's what our court of opinion team chose. First up, Steve Gates' testimony about the last time he saw the victim, Regina Hicks, alive. And here are some quotes from that. The prosecutor asked him, once Regina arrived at your property, what happened? And Steve Gates said they started arguing. While they were arguing, I went out the main door. Prosecutor, what did you see when you returned? Gates said, I remember the driver window was down. I remember looking in the car and I saw Regina crumpled up on the passenger side floor. The prosecutor asked, where was the defendant? Gates said, outside the passenger door. And Paul said to me, dude, she's blank dead. Let's bring back in our guest power panel, Curtis Clemens, Marie Pereira, and Jarrett Ferrantino. Marie Pereira, let's start with you on this one. What's your opinion on that part of the evidence? This is a witness who has full immunity, and he's the only reason we are here at a trial now.
I think it's very powerful testimony, him saying, dude, she's blank dead, and him being an eyewitness to her in the vehicle, and that's where she ended up being found, drowned in the pond. But again, that's just his word. Someone who was given immunity more than 2.5 decades ago. And what kind of relationship did they have afterwards? Does he have a motive to lie? Is he coming here to lie on him because maybe they had some sort of external past beef? All of that is going to come into play. That testimony is not the best evidence, although it is the evidence. There are problems with that because it's a he say.
Jared, what's your opinion on this case and this witness on the stand who, as Marie points out, is under full immunity?
Well, the fact that he's under full immunity, Julia, is significant. That gives him a bias or a motive to tell a story. This is a long delayed trial, 24 years, Gates sang a different tune. Now he wants to tell the truth. The real issue is it just a he said situation against Hicks, or is there DNA and corroborating evidence to support what he's saying? That's the problem. There wasn't DNA of Hicks in the car to help corroborate with what Gates is saying. See, when you have a witness that has motivation or changed their story, you always want to buttress that with maybe, hey, he has a health risk. He doesn't want to die with a lie on his soul. And by the way, Hicks's DNA is in the car. You don't have that here, and that's a problem. So the jury has to take a leap of faith with Mr. Gates here. And it's not an extraordinary leap because they're looking at him, they're assessing him, but when you lied in the past, it hurts you.
Yeah, and you're right. DNA is typically what we see break open these cold cases, and that's why we land in a courtroom after many years, but that's simply not the case here. Curtis, I want to get your take on this other portion of Steve Gates' testimony. And this focuses in on Paul Hicks' actions at the pond, according to Steve Gates. So he told this jury that Paul says, follow me, and he was driving Regina's car. And Gates says he followed him down towards the pond. And he says all he remembers, this should have been at nighttime and it was pretty dark, and he said all he remembers is seeing taillights up in the air. The prosecutor said the taillights were from what car? Gates responded that it was Regina's car. Paul Hicks was muddy, and he said he was kind of in shock. Paul came out of the pond wet and got into the car with me. Paul made a phone call, left her a voicemail, and something along the lines of saying, where the blank are you at? Come pick this kid up. Yeah, keep in mind, the child that they shared was with them at the time sleeping. And Stephen Gates goes on to say, Paul said to me, you're involved. And in hindsight, This witness says, I was just a dumb kid at the time. I didn't know what I was doing. I just remember the threats over the years to me and my family and my cattle. I mean, this is serious stuff, Curtis. This is him laying it out for this jury, and it almost explains what happened and why he kept silent. What's your opinion on where the defense should go after this?
Well, as far as the defense goes, I think they are incredibly brilliant in setting up this defense where they're basically not doing much to defend him, or they are setting up a great reason for him to set up an appeal on a later date. Because what's happening here, when you look at what Stephen Gates has said, you know, the jury has to take that into consideration. Why have you waited 24 years to come forward with this information? What part did you play in that? And of course, as Jared said, he has immunity. So that's something that's going to be on the jury's mind. They have to consider that.
Marie Pereira, do you agree this is brilliant? Because we do know now that the defense is not putting on any case. They did not bring in Paul Hicks to the stand. They are going to rely on closing arguments that are happening on Friday.
I don't know that it's brilliant. I think what's brilliant is what Jared said. I don't want to die with a lie. I love that. I get that part. And they don't have to put on a case because the burden is on the state to prove each and every element of this crime beyond a reasonable doubt. So if they feel like that best evidence is shaky for all the reasons that Jared said and my other esteemed guest said, he has reason to lie, he got immunity, maybe all they need to do is sit down and let the state do their job and prove this 25-year-old case beyond a reasonable doubt. Because someone didn't want to die with a lie? Nah.
It is really what the prosecution has in terms of bolstering Stephen Gates's testimony. I was surprised, Jarrett, that I didn't hear the defense suggest a money motive, suggest that he had any ill will towards Paul Hicks. They didn't really have any motivation for him to lie other than the fact that he had lied in the past, because police asked him all these same questions in 2001, but he never came forward with anything.
Well, they're going to mention that, Julia, in closing, I think. You know, I always, and trial lawyers tie these cases and witnesses' testimony to a story. And the things that Gates has said, my family was threatened, my property was threatened, I was a dumb kid. Those are things that could speak to the jury, and they say, hey, look, I did stupid things when I was a kid. I told lies when I was a kid. My family's been threatened, or I had a concern, and I didn't come forward. Those are the kind of things the prosecution has to highlight. If I'm the defense attorney in this case, I'm just beating the drum of it's 24 years, and now we hear what he claims is the truth. And if you believe that, that takes us to beyond a reasonable doubt. I got a bridge in Brooklyn, we'll sell you.
Let's take a listen back to something that the officer on the stand, the day before Stephen Gates took the stand. Here's the cross-examination. Give us a little insight into how this defense cross-examined this witness who we couldn't record, but take a listen back to that.
As you sit here today, you can't rule out that he lied in his proffer to the prosecutors, can you?
No, sir.
Okay. And you can't rule out, as you sit there, that he's going to lie to these people tomorrow.
I would hope not, sir.
You can't rule out that he is going to lie tomorrow.
I can't. No, sir, I can't.
Curtis Clemens, from your law enforcement background, talk about what this means for these officers who have been investigating this case perhaps for 24 years.
Well, you know, it's going to bring it either to a conclusion, or it's something that, you know, much like, you know, Mr. Gates, is something he doesn't want to take to his grave, you know, as he gets older and his health is failing. Having been a detective for many years, having worked the case, and you pour your heart into a case and you reach that dead end and you have no more leads, and then something like this comes, it reinvigorates you and gives you hope for closure. And so it's up to the jury at this point, once they receive that case, you know, where it's going to go. If he's convicted, the detectives as well have closure, as well as the family. If he's not convicted, the problems go on.
Up to the jury, and on Friday they are going to hear those closing arguments.